Hello, welcome to this game review. We'll have a look at a game in which white got a very winning position, but then he, so to say, sold his advantage for a bit too cheap. He could have gotten a lot more from the position, but he only got a somewhat winning position. Let's take a look. So it started as a caro, and after knight f3 d5, white decided to take. And if you want to play the exchange caro, it doesn't really make sense to put the knight on f3. We can just play d4, and in this position we can choose our system, either bishop d3 or c4, or slow with knight f3. But okay, here d4, bishop g4, and this is one of the problems. Now this bishop can easily come out. White played bishop e2, knight c6, and from here white started to play some very bad moves. From a positional point of view, it's clear that he doesn't know how to place his pieces in the exchange caro structure, so hopefully some tips might help. So in general, firstly, we always castle if possible, because we will castle anyway, most likely. And then the most basic way to develop is to put the pawn on c3. We want the pawn to defend d4, we don't want our pieces tied to this pawn. And then we will put our bishop on f4, this is the most active diagonal for the bishop. And then we will develop this knight to d2. From there, we will try to put our knight on e5, and hopefully with the knight on e5 we will be able to expand in the center and on the king side. So this is usually how people play, and there are many examples. If black wants to see some examples, there is the opening database on Lichess, and he can check this position and see how white wins. Okay, knight c3. This is a bit of a mistake because the knight doesn't belong on the square. It's not attacking anything, d5 is never weak, and the knight will have to go somewhere to become effectual. Knight f6, bishop e3. This is also a very passive move, a very bad square for the bishop. It's just a big pawn here. The bishop should go to f4, ideally, and white will have to get rid of his knight at some point by moving around his pieces. Okay, bishop e3. Then white plays a3. This is also a mistake because it creates some weaknesses on the queen side. Black's plan long term is to play b5 and b4 anyway, and now b5, b4 will open up some lines towards the white pawns, which doesn't help. White should just either play knight e5 to improve his bishop, his knight, I mean, a little bit, or just castle. Okay, a3. Now both sides castle, and white plays b4, which is already a big positional mistake. Now the c3 and c4 and c2 squares are all weak, and the black rook can go to c8 and attack all of them. And the white pawn push to b4 didn't help white at all. It only created a hook for black's a5 move, and as mentioned, very weak squares on the c file. So there was no reason for white to do this. Again, white should try to play on the king side and center, for example rook e1, to prepare knight e5 slowly, like rook c8. Now white can even improve his knight like this. This is of course not very obvious, but white has to understand that this knight is very badly placed and it should go somewhere else. Or white can go, for example, h3, and then try to exchange some pieces with the idea of improving this knight again. But okay, b4, a6, queen d2, and g3 defends the h2 pawn, though white could do this with tempo. But okay, g3. Now black is doing very well after something like rook ac8. He can continue by maneuvering his knight, or even play e5 at some point, and white's pieces are all very badly placed and all very weak. But the bishop h3. Now h6 was played, and in general this is kind of a useless move. It's not clear what black is supposed to be planning here. And here white finds a very nice tactic, which is to take on h6, with the idea that if black takes back after queen h6, this is a fork and white will get his piece back. So black plays knight h7, and now white has the advantage. Bishop d3 is a nice move, leaving the bishop on h6, and here black is tempted to take, but here It seems there is a big fork, but black's idea was bishop f5, and at the end of this, white is a piece down, but in general, white's attack on the king is very dangerous, and also he can take more pawns with knight d5. And at this point, after queen d8, for example, white is actually basically winning positionally, not only because he has enough material, but also because this king is terribly weak, and black has a weak pawn on f5, and a weak structure in general. After c4, or other moves as well, white's central mass is also starting to run. But okay, knight g5, here black's only move was f6, after which white would have to fight knight d5, and after something like this, knight e6 is possible, and after some exchanges, for example like this, white is again doing very well. He has a rook for 2 pieces, but he also has 3 pawns, which is more than enough. But in the game, knight g5 happened, and this should in general end in checkmate. Knight d5. Now the threat is not only to take the queen, but also to play knight f6, after which checkmate will become inevitable. But after f6 here, white decided to exchange into a winning endgame, but he could have continued his attack with knight takes f6. Now he has 4 pawns for a piece, and he's also checkmating. Now there's a threat of checkmate like this, and it's not clear how black is supposed to defend. And here white is destroying black because of his strong attack, though in the game playing knight c7 is also fine, but it's not as accurate. Here it's after rook a8, white has a rook and 3 pawns for 2 pieces, which is of course a lot, and white should be winning, but it's still some technical work to be done. In the game ended quite soon, as black didn't even take the knight, and at this point white is a rook up. After black takes the knight, white is an exchange up, but this knight is also stranded, and this king is still terribly weak. And a few moves later, the game even ended in checkmate. White decided to attack this king, which is a good idea, and after h3, rook c3 is a nice move, forking the knight, and h3, and objectively black should try to not get checkmated, but of course this is hopeless. So in the game, black allowed checkmate, and the white won the game eventually. So even though he misplaced his pieces badly in the opening, he didn't really know the plans of the exchange caro-kann, it worked out as white saw the tactics and found this nice temporary piece sacrifice.